precipice is here, and our trust in the system is lacking. We cannot stand idly by. We need you to take the initiative, and we must infiltrate every layer of society like they did to us. From the media, the conglomerates, politics, the justice system, to end corruption, to end exploitation, to shed transparency, to hold people accountable, and to see innovation and technology create the change we want to see, to initiate a free market without coercion or deceit, without corruption or manipulation, to help inspire, to help make life better. No parlor tricks, no money games. It's just you, us, and some titans who want the world to change like you do. Because you and me, we were made for the moment. And that moment is now.
Welcome to Made for the Moment, describing the world through unique topics of interest. And now your host, Jason Dodier and Jarrett Grossman.
In recent years, it's been a tsunami as companies and individuals move and embrace the digital transformation. We hear terms like influencer marketing, brands, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. These things dominate our lives, and most folks are using 3 to 4 of these social media apps on a daily basis. Today, we're going to dive a bit deeper into this stratosphere, if you will, and look at, peer into the world of brands, creators, and content. It's going to be very, very insightful. We're going to talk to some leaders in this space that are going to answer some of the most pressing questions. And really, we're going to try to bring up some of the stuff that we've already been alluding to in earlier episodes. So with that, Jarrett, maybe to kick off our dialogue together, do you believe influencer marketing is a realistic career for people, right? So maybe tell me a bit, you're somebody I would consider an influencer. You've been on social media, branding yourself and your companies for the last decade. What do you think about that particular question on influencer marketing?
Like you said, social media is really relevant in our lives. In terms of it being a career, I think it could be a temporary career. I think that it could sort of, get you set up to be able to, whether it's create products or services on your own to take advantage of an audience, or you're going to be able to get some advertising dollars, right? Companies are looking to get in front of people, but those budgets, as you know, Jason, in the advertising world, it ebbs and flows. So there's going to be a couple of months where they're really going to sort of pound you heavy with some dollars your way. And then they sort of ease back on their marketing when there's a little bit of a recession or sales aren't as good or whatnot. And so if you can sort of hedge your bets a little bit with different companies, that's going to help. But it's still not going to be foolproof. There's going to be just waves in terms of the economic cycle that are going to be very difficult to navigate if you're just relying on advertising as your sort of sole source of revenue, so to speak. Now, if you've got business experience and you have the ability to create products, services, and you have all kinds of back-end systems to be able to take advantage of a funnel, so to speak, where you're driving that audience with really engaging content. And if you're an influencer, you probably know how to get the attention of people to stop what they're doing, stop scrolling, and listen to you, watch you. But to actually monetize off of that for your career, besides the big, headlines that you see in sort of page 6 in the tabloids of, the rare YouTube stars that make 6-7 figures a year, it's going to be kind of difficult for the average person to do that. That I don't want to say a pipe dream, so to speak, but it is much, much more rare than what the mainstream media has led us to believe in terms of being able to have it, so to speak, as a full career for a decade or longer. And we'll talk about this in depth, obviously, in the episode when we have a special guest on. And obviously, I want to glean some insight from you, Jay, in terms of the future of social media. But these platforms that are really big in today's day and age are not necessarily going to be the same platforms that are going to be big 8 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. So, again, temporary kind of career is going to be, really great. And you should put your feelers out there, so to speak, to build a following, because that's how you're going to be able to sell products and ventures and services that you are going to take up. So Jay, pivoting here, in terms of businesses being able to rely on social media, what do you think is sort of that call, so to speak, and what experiences can you draw from in terms of your industry in particular? This is the energy sector. You are deeply entrenched in the brick and mortar side of things. You have your old school methods. And I believe that that's sort of the tried and true method, so to speak, that's going to last long term. But, big companies are still looking at social media as a means to be able to get undervalued attention, get in front of eyeballs. Are you seeing it with your sector, so to speak, or is the old school method just the way that's winning out?
Well, look, Jarrett, first and foremost, last year was the first year where digital marketing spend surpassed traditional marketing for the first time ever, right? So, and a big thanks to these advancements has truthfully been, as you stated and talked about, around influencer marketing, particularly from companies that have strong brands, trying to find these major stars that you also alluded to in your discussion. And for that reason, and our guests are going to be talking about this because they're uniquely positioned to give us a little bit more historical context, influencer marketing platforms are going to become essential to running effective campaigns. Now, you asked a couple of questions there. At first, you talked about my industry, health. On the side, obviously, a lot of interest in health and wellness, but in particular, looking at brick and mortar and the energy space. So let me talk about that first. Big investments are being made in, of course, digital advertising, and of course, looking for ways to enhance the brand. And there are certain technologies I've seen out there, Jarrett. For example, different social outreach apps that we've been investing in, or other companies are investing. I mean, you have to look at all the platforms and determine, all right, which apps are going to be able to provide a fresh take for your audience and how your media is going to be consumed, right? You can gain more insights, right? Another, which ties into what you've been working on with Scroll and JARBLY, is something called data scrollytelling, is what I like to refer to it as. And I've heard that brought up a couple of times, and I'd like to hear you talk about this a bit, but it's essentially scrolling is the new clicking. So companies, regardless of your vertical, are trying to transition and find a seamless way so they can tell stories, provide data sources in a manner that's effortless and retains the attention of consumers. And the other thing that I've seen too is outside of video creation technology, so all companies using more video creation to publish and satisfy their viewers, right? And to make sure their streaming supply, whether that's customer stories or new product releases. But you also have this push, Jarrett, around wearable journalism, right? Which is really unique. And that's anything from Apple Watch to all the connected devices that Chuck Brooks talked with us about on the earlier episode on security and kind of provided. I encourage all our audience to tune in and check out episode 6. But what I'll leave you with on this piece, what I'm most interested in to see in my space and others, is the advent and the push towards augmented reality, right? I am extremely interested in AR. We've been watching it very closely. Not only can AR assist, Jarrett, with complex procedures, but you could have your social media page up, right? You could be strolling out in Boca or somewhere in Miami, and you can enhance it, or your followers can enhance that in a way to look at and say, all right, here's a map of his current location, places of interest, around Jarrett. That might be bars, gyms, restaurants, tourist attractions. So I think you're going to see companies continue to hone in on these different elements. And outside, of course, of the current environment we're in, they're going to use this time to further build and enhance their digital strategy. But clearly, spend is going to continue to increase in these areas, which our guests are going to be talking to us much more in depth. But Jarrett, maybe just closing out, I'd love to get your perspective on some of those points, maybe enhance what I just said or refute some of those items based on what you're seeing. And also, last point is the viability of these stars that are out there. If companies want to, and maybe companies that have not been in the influencer marketing space before, branding, and they're just learning, right? They can leverage companies and leaders like the ones we're going to have on our show today. But how should they go about building that strategy? So I think it's a multifaceted question that will then take us into our special guests.
So I think we need to look at it from the perspective of it's really about a guard that's going to have to sort of transition and shift into. We have the old guard, so to speak. Most of the money in America, in the world at large, is largely dominated by individuals 50 and above. They did not grow up with social media. So once that guard sort of shifts a little bit, and now the younger generation becomes those, elder population, so to speak, who has the money through the businesses that they've created, the ventures that they've gone on, inheritances, all that kind of stuff. Well, now you have those individuals who grew up on social media where it's obviously going to shift a little bit and it's going to become more dominant in terms of our day-to-day. Social media will directly result or correlate into sales, revenue, profit, etc. It's not quite there yet, so to speak, because a lot of your traditional businesses, you really have to understand it from an industry by industry perspective in terms of, in my opinion, a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, your traditional brick and mortar stores, they can get enhanced by social media, but the bulk of their business, most of them are not coming from social media, so to speak, right? So it's important to just keep that in perspective. If you're in the restaurant industry, for instance, Yelp is going to be obviously hugely important, and that's going to be a huge bulk of your factor, but not every industry is quite there yet. But as you mentioned, Jay, the future, where it holds, it's going to be interesting with AR, VR. Esports and gaming is sort of the next big paradigm shift that's going to happen, in virtual reality gaming, all that kind of stuff. The current social media platforms just can't handle the technology that's out there or what's going to come. You're going to see a next shift of social media type platforms that revolve around this space, so to speak. And when that happens, you're going to see huge market share being pulled away from the YouTubes and the Facebooks and the Instagrams of the world who sort of have the guard and dominance right now. And when voice technology comes out and it's really, really good, Amazon is going to be a big leader in that. You're going to see Microsoft get in the game. You're going to see IBM. You're going to see these big players take big market shares away from these current social media empires. And lots of small companies and ventures are going to come up and pull away market share. And hopefully, you and I, Jay, in terms of Scroll, we're going to be able to do that. But super excited to sort of have our guests on here who are going to elaborate and go into extreme depth and detail through, our line of questioning, everything that they have to offer and share in terms of the influencer marketing sphere and the advertising space and what's to come with social media. So excited to have them on.
Thanks for tuning in to a show dedicated to transforming business, media, and politics. And now a word from our sponsors. Thanks for tuning in to Made for the Moment, with conversations and unique guests surrounding business, news, politics, wellness, and entertainment. And now a word from our special guest.
Welcome back, everybody. So following some of the discussions that Jarrett and I had earlier, we're joined now in the studio with Eric Dahan, who's somebody I go back with a little bit and have admired and watched from afar over the years. Eric is a Forbes 30 Under 30 list. He's been part of Forbes 30 Under 30 since 2017, as well as Inc.'s 30 Under 30 list in 2016. and he is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Open Influence, where he essentially is overseeing the strategic vision and growth of the company. Now, Eric's going to tell you a little bit more about that momentarily, but essentially, Open Influence is harnessing the power of influencer marketing and leading these influencers to essentially help brands grow in a strategic, crafty manner that I truthfully haven't seen that's out there in the market today. A little bit more on Eric's background, right? So Eric is, like myself, has a background in economics and business. And he takes that in his unique desire and skill set around mathematics and game theory and social sciences, which is something that he's built his career on and was known for in the early days. He's a serial entrepreneur like my co-host, Jared Grossman, founding Splurge, which is a mobile app that combines social curation and e-commerce, essentially aggregating online flash sales from a variety of retailers. And he also served as the chief executive officer and managing partner for the company. And before Splurge, Eric also got his start in digital at Outlook as a member. It's a member-only online marketplace offering flash sales and limited time sales. So I want to start off really. One thing I want to highlight too that I just got across my desk: Open Influence was they were included in the 37th annual Inc. 5000 list. So this is a list, by the way, that represents some of the most successful companies in America. So Eric, you're obviously in really good company. Some of the names I'm looking at: Dell, Domino's, Pandora, Microsoft. So incredible that you've personally been honored. Open Influence is a stream of things that we've seen come across over the last couple of years. So maybe let's kick off. Thank you for being here. Maybe tell us a bit about Open Influence, the mission, and in particular, maybe some keen insights from influencers and brands, both before and maybe even with an eye to this current pandemic that we're sitting in right now.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here and excited to dive in with you on this. To just jump right into the business and to sort of our start, when the whole idea for us was really sort of an accident, right? This was at a time when myself and my early co-founders were looking for a way to promote another startup we were working on. And my brother, had the insight of saying, hey, you know what? There are these new platforms that are coming out that are mobile native. There are people that aren't really celebrities, but that have a following. Let's work with some of them. And at the time he had a denim brand that he was promoting. Now he had like maybe 5 samples. So he didn't even have inventory. He had 5 samples, and he built a following where people were constantly commenting on Instagram back in like 2012 saying, where can I buy these jeans? Where can I get them? And so I saw that firsthand. And so when he came and presented the idea of, hey, let's work with these people, again, before the word influencer was coined, we said, okay. And then we started working with them, and we saw downloads coming into the app that we were working on. We saw conversions happening within the app. And it was sort of very organic out of necessity, where we said, okay, wow, like there's this whole new emerging class of content creators on these mobile first platforms that are coming out. And oh my God, they're driving value and driving results. And then from there, we were kind of figuring out what approach we take. And so at the time, the business model that was leading was the talent agency model. Whenever it came to talent, if you wanted to be in that industry, you're typically representing the talent. And so the big aha moment we had is we said, okay, well, talent agencies are on the supply side, right? They represent the supply being the talent. And we said, well, there's so much talent now emerging every day. Let's build a business that's on the other side, on the demand side, right? So there's so many influencers, so many content creators emerging that really let's align with the advertisers that are trying to figure out how to optimize their spends and build a business around their needs. And let's create value for our customers, being the advertisers there. And so at the time, it was a pretty risky move. I remember, kind of, being laughed at a little bit, thinking like, okay, well, this business has no solid foundation because they're not representing the talent. We don't have contracts, and at the time the MCNs were all based on their exclusive relationships. and they were really seen as the leader. And so, but we're pretty confident. We're also kind of naive and took the jump anyway, and we're very fortunate that it panned out. And in terms of what we do, we're really all about scaling the storytelling process, and our mission as a company is to really just be human, right? Make advertising human. So bring that element back, bring that content creation. Each of these content creators are so unique in what they do and what they produce, and they generate organically immense amount of value, and that's why they have these audiences around them. And so it's helping really bridge that gap with our clients. Now, in terms of COVID, the industry, has been just surging year over year. 2019 was a record year for the industry. And I feel like in advertising in general, what tends to happen is you start off with these really tiny, experimental budgets. Like, hey, we have a few bucks left over. Let's test some stuff out. Let's see what sticks. And then it kind of moves on and grows from these sort of test budgets to more of like a main, maybe an ancillary spend, then a main line item spend, and then expands from there. And so we saw that over the past 6-7 years with influencer marketing. And I feel like 2019 was really the year where it was a true line item spend. Now, with COVID, what we're seeing now that's really interesting with all the data models we've built is we're really seeing that there's an increase in the number of sponsored posts, but and we're able to break down and see kind of what industries are surging. So to no surprise, travel and hospitality is way down. Apparel is way down as well, just in terms of sponsored post activity. Beauty, surprisingly, is up during this time, which was something that was a little bit of an aha moment for me. Entertainment is up as well. We're looking also at some of the CPG brands. CPG is kind of sector specific. The whole industry is obviously doing very well right now as a result of everything happening. But I think there's still a lot of sensitivity for CPG brands around their messaging, right? If you're a big cleaning supply company, you're going to be a little bit more particular in how you message things to not come across as opportunistic, but really make sure that you're able to build those connections with your audience all the same.
And so, Eric, you touched on a couple of points there, actually. Really quick first for our audience. MCN, I'm assuming, multi-channel network.
Yep.
Could you just touch on really fast what that is for listeners that might not know what a multi-channel network is?
Yeah. So I see that as sort of the stepping stone into like the influencer marketing industry today. And so what the MCNs are, they're really these agencies for YouTube channels. The way an agency works, it's really collective bargaining power, right? Let's get the top 50 celebrities that fit this criteria, or top, 200 athletes, and let's represent them. And so if anyone wants to work with an athlete, they go through us. We can, sort of like a union, get the rates going up, make sure that the clients, being the athletes in this case, are able to maximize their earning potential. And so the MCNs were supply side the same way talent agencies were. They represented these channels. Their client was and still is, because many of them are still active, the talent. And so the difference in that model is, again, there's always going to be a need for top tier talent, large talent, to have management representation to make sure that they're operating their best interest. But what we look at is, because the barrier to entry to creating content has gone down over the years, from producing a video on YouTube, which, takes time, takes effort, right? Takes energy. Like, you know this well from running this show, right? It takes time editing content, just going through it, producing it, coordinating with it. So, and it went down over the years just based on platforms like Instagram, for example, where, anyone can take a picture of avocado toast and it looks amazing. And so you had a bunch of content creators coming about. And so that enabled what I call like the other 99% of talent to emerge. And so our model really said, okay, how do we, sort of do what the MCNs took the first step in doing, but instead of representing the talent, let's represent the advertisers, because we believe that if we're doing a good job representing the advertisers, it means more money is going to flow through this sort of economy, and in turn, the creators are going to be able to earn more and to be able to support the content that they create.
Got it. No, very clear. Thank you for that. And you talked about also, of course, the barrier to entry is much lower. We're in an environment right now, COVID, where most people are sitting home, and we rely heavily on all the different. I was reading a statistic in a couple of years, the average person's going to be using at least 10 apps. I can't name 10, but I'm sure there's plenty of apps out there. And Jared's still getting me spun up on Instagram right now, which is awesome. But you talked about some different sectors and verticals, some that surprised you, some that make total sense based on where we are. If you're somebody that wants to use this time to become an influencer, to start doing some advertising, to maybe build something from scratch, what are some of the things people could do to become influencers? Some tips maybe, and also if they have somewhat of a following, potentially like we would call maybe a nano, what can they do to take it to the next level and maybe get recognized by an open influence to be part of that ecosystem?
Yeah. So the aha moment for me in terms of how to look at just like an influencer and their sort of frame of reference and their perspective is really like any entrepreneur, right? And you'd appreciate this with your background in business and economics. It's really just a marketplace, right? You have people that are demanding content on one side, and then people that are creating content, and the currency is not money that's being exchanged, just attention. So, how much attention are you paying into what? And that could be quantified in the form of views or likes or click-throughs. It just kind of all depends, but really views, I would say, is that benchmark. And so in terms of how you think about it, I would say approach it the same way as any entrepreneur starting a new business. So look at the market and identify a need in the market, and then create a solution for it. And the solution in this case would, the product in this case would be the content that you're creating. For example, if you're looking to just start, a fashion blog, the question or a fashion Instagram account, let's say, like figure out what's different. There's so many of those accounts out there. How are you going to bring value that's different and that's unique and addresses something that the current, competitive set is not addressing right now? And so that's really how to think about it. In terms of open influence and how we work, so we look at a pretty big data set. We have 500,000 influencers that we put in our network, and this was generated from a much larger list. I think about 1.5 million plus that we went through, and so we have quite a few criteria there in terms of vetting. And then we also have two types of influencers in our network. One are influencers that have come to us, and the other are influencers that we've proactively added for reach out that we think are interesting. And so the reason we do both is we want to make sure that we're canvassing as much of the influencer ecosystem as possible. And really what we do is we look at, for every brand, every campaign, every project, every product that we're promoting, we really look specifically at what they're trying to communicate. And then we identify the best influencers for that. And the way we do it is we analyze text, we use image recognition technology. We built a lot of machine learning algorithms as well, based on what we've seen success in, and just trained to also help us categorize influencers. So we use a lot of this data to say, okay, if we're working with, let's say, a yoga brand, we want to find the influencers that perform best when they're posting about yoga. And we could identify this through, let's say, image recognition technology, where here's someone creating videos of yoga. And then maybe we can look through and say, this summer's around the corner. We want to have people that post about yoga on the beach because we know that's going to perform really well. Here are the creators that perform best when they post that kind of content, when the messaging matches. Here are some other brands they worked with and how they performed. More topical example is maybe what we want to do given this time is we'll say, okay, well, people can't go to the gym. For that same yoga brand, let's find creators and influencers that are generating yoga related or workout content at home and are posting from it at home. And let's find the people that get the highest impression rates or engagement rates on the various platforms when they post about that kind of content at home. Let's then look at it to see if it's a really good match for that brand or not, which that's where the expertise and kind of the fine refinement comes in, right? because the algorithms could present the people, but then you have to look through and just say, like, is their content style aligned with the brand? Is it not? In this case, are they really working out, doing yoga, or are they just more so taking selfies in the mirror in front of a yoga mat, right? So, and so that kind of is what we'll look at, and we'll put the influencers, and we'll reach out to those influencers for that campaign, just depending on their fit. So it really starts with the brand's need, and then we kind of work from there. And we also look at audience and demographic data. That's pretty much table stakes in what we do. But I think in today's world, demographics is a really old school way, in my opinion, of looking at your audience, right? It tells you, like, maybe their age, ethnicity, race, income. To some degree, that's important, right? If you're selling a car, you want to make sure they're old enough to drive, and they could afford the car that you're selling. But really, I think in today's world, it's a lot less about, who you are from a demographic standpoint, and much more about who you are from a psychographic standpoint, right? Like, what are you interested in? What do you care about? What kind of content are you engaging in? And that's a lot more interesting and a lot more meaningful than just what your gender happens to be.
Yeah, and Eric, you brilliantly put with so many things here. In terms of actually the monetization side of things, right?
Yeah.
Going back 10, 15, 20 years ago, people would not believe the opportunities that are available to influencers like you're talking about. And there's a few camps, so to speak. There's people who are really highly experienced, and there's people who are making this not only a full-time career. I mean, there are millionaires who are just doing this all day long, right? Just posting and getting the partnerships, the sponsorships. And then there's other people who are thinking about becoming influencers. And then there's people who are sort of stuck in the middle, so to speak.
Yep.
Meaning they kind of have a brand, and you eloquently put it as you're getting attention that doesn't necessarily lead to dollars, right? For people who have a social media following, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, et cetera. So what would your recommendation? Obviously, you walked us through a lot of ideas in terms of what people can bring to the forefront in terms of how they can attract a bigger following and brands, and working with companies like yours. But for the average person out there, how can content creators and influencers sort of monetize great content that they have? And is it realistic for them? There's a lot of people who are sort of might want to get into it, but most people by nature are kind of trial and error people, right? So, a lot of times you'll gurus will say people just aren't committed enough or whatever it is. And sometimes that's the case. But if something's not working for 2 months, you're not just gonna quit your job that's actually paying the bills to actually do this. So how realistic is it for somebody to just basically treat this as a career and then monetize off of Instagrams and all these other social media platforms?
Yeah. I mean, just over the years observing and seeing, certain creators build and influence others, kind of falling out of favor with their audience, and kind of that whole, again, dynamic market. My sort of 2 cents is you have to really be passionate about what you do and really care, because it's not going to be easy at first. And you're going to be putting in a lot of effort as you're building, your influence and creating content. And you're not going to see, numbers grow overnight. Like, you might get really lucky and have a video that goes viral. But, the truth is, most of the time that doesn't happen, right? Most of the time it's very small, incremental. And so there are a lot of these sort of barriers that I think, creators hit, and they kind of give up, right? The same way with entrepreneurs. There's a lot of failure on the path to success, and a lot of areas where, hearing any interview from great entrepreneurs, you always hear them say, like, yeah, I thought so many times about throwing in the towel at this point, or at so many points along the way. And I think it's a very similar thing with content creators. There's so many times, and so many, because it's a slow build, where the only thing they have driving them is the passion for creating that kind of content. And the other thing too is it does take time to do this. So you have to really care and really enjoy with what you're doing. Otherwise, it's going to come across as inauthentic. So I would say that's really sort of the starting point there. And then once you start building, then the way I look at it is really it comes down to basic supply and demand in terms of monetizing that, right? How many companies, how many people out there are demanding to access your audience based on the story you're telling them, or based on what your audience trusts you in. So an example is, if I talk about credit cards and I'm comparing credit cards all day, well, that's obvious, right? There are a lot of credit card companies out there that would love to tap into my audience and have me promote one of those brands, right? So I could look at that and say, well, here are the number of companies out there that are demanding to access my audience, and here's their purchasing power. Likewise, I might have millions of companies or small businesses wanting to access my audience, but they don't have really much spending power. So then that's a different dynamic, right? So I think when you're going into this as well, it's understanding that. But my advice comes back to, don't create content for the purpose of monetization, because chasing the money won't get you there. Really focus on creating great content, and the money will come.
And going off that, that's a great point. And I want to say, when Jarrett and I were talking a couple days ago about this topic, there was a quote that he shared with me. He said, and it goes with what you're talking about, pictures of people with influencers doesn't make them a person of influence or an influencer. Be drawn to those showcasing and sharing authenticity, authority, experience, and knowledge. Be less concerned with who someone is standing next to it. I think that kind of goes, Eric, to a little bit about the whole building credibility and actually being out there and doing something dynamic that's going to help people. They trust you for it. Yep. And you become known in that area. So if you look at the influencers and some stories or experiences that you've seen, first of all, what would be some examples maybe of some riveting content? For example, if I want to be seen as an influencer in a certain area, whether that, you talked about yoga. I've been doing more yoga now because it's pretty much the only thing I could do in my small apartment in Manhattan. So we could use yoga for an example. But if somebody's getting started, what could be some ways they could create riveting content, right? Most people aren't like Jarrett. They don't have a great acting background and don't, look like Sylvester Stallone, and they don't have something they could focus on to build an audience. And so
I'm just
if you could,
Jay.
You're rolling with that now, but he's been known as Stallone's doppelganger, and he's an excellent actor. And that's why he's built such a, one of the reasons he's built a great following. He's very passionate and authentic. But maybe, could you share some examples, like some riveting things you've seen from influencers of that have built up in maybe their early days that allowed them to get where they are, starting from scratch?
Yeah, I think they're just kind of like one of the earlier things you touched on around just, being able to be authentic and build that presence. I think in just my own experience, when I was first kind of just doing any sort of videos in front of camera, and I'm not someone who likes to be in front of a camera at all. It was super awkward, right? I felt like a robot in front of the camera, and it just takes some time to just get comfortable and say, you know what, kind of screw it. I'm just going to be myself. I'm just going to, talk to the camera how I talk to anyone else. And I think it's kind of realizing your own style where you really sort of kick in and start building. But around like influencers early on, in the early days of Instagram, for example, they were people that would just create content about anything, just really random. And based on the algorithms and the discovery page back then, people would just sort of ascend to becoming an influencer. And then they kind of had this, oh shit moment of like, oh my God, people are engaging in that random post I did. I have to do more. And then they kind of experiment with that. So I think, there's a big degree of randomness that also happens in the early days, because you have a bunch of people just trying stuff. And then it's kind of like whatever works initially, it kind of sets them up on a trajectory to grow and influence. And that's what's happening right now on TikTok, where it's like, people are just creating random videos all the time. And for whatever reason, one kind of hits. And now the next day, that person has millions of views and has built a following. and then they're trying to figure out. So that's one route that works, and that route more so works in early days on a new platform where it's just the randomness route. Just throw a bunch of stuff against the wall, see what sticks, and and just create content and see what works. So it happened on Instagram several years ago. It's happening on TikTok now, and I'm seeing it firsthand. So that's pretty exciting with that platform. The other route is be a subject matter expert. So when people use the word influencer, it could sometimes have a negative connotation because people think about, only like your, bikini models and people obsessed with just fame, as opposed to people with real subject matter expertise. Now, there are several accounts on YouTube, for example, that, they're creators and they're influencers, and they'll talk about things like mathematics or physics or what have you. And those accounts, these are just people that are really, really passionate about the content they create and their subject matter. And they've built to a point where they have millions of followers. And so that's an example of more of like kind of like the steady growth trajectory. And they've been able to build really meaningful followings. There's one creator, Grant Sanderson, three brown, one blue, I think is the channel's name. He just does math videos and animations, but like the guy has millions of people tuning into those videos, and it's amazing. And so when people think about influence in content creators, they don't think about these niches. They really think about the Fire Festival type bikini model, but that's not the case at all. They're really content creators for everything. And there are so many different growth stories around how to become an influencer. And again, the thing that I think is sustainable is being in the picture with someone else famous. That might get you some shock value, but that's not going to build longevity. Creating content that people are going to want and keep coming back to and be loyal to, that's the real value in this world and in this ecosystem.
And I want to give a shout out to, speaking of that, there's a channel called Français Authentique. And I've told you, Eric, I lived in France for 3 years. And to keep my French sharp, this guy, Johan, put this channel together. He's built it up. I mean, the 5 years I've been following, you could just feel the passion. I mean, everything he puts into it, every episode, there's so much thought there. And that's why people continue to go to it. And same if you're looking at science, mathematics, even the basics of satellites and rocketry. There's stuff out there for everybody, and you can tell when people are really passionate about what they do and grow from there. So
exactly, and like it reminds me of the, sort of when I was growing up, you'd have the Discovery Channel, and you'd have these sort of shows where they'd go in with the camera into NASA and they'd film some stuff and share a bit about what's happening and what's new, and it was super exciting. But I remember just watching the same reruns over and over because it just took so much time to create each episode. And it was this really convoluted way of getting it from, the idea and the writers all the way to making it to your TV, because there are just so many steps. And when I think about, YouTubers and creators, like this channel that you're watching, it might not make it on a traditional television network, but this guy's essentially doing all the work of a network or of a showrunner, putting this whole thing together. And he's able to get out episodes at a much higher rate and get you more specific content for you and what you're interested to than what a TV network could do, which is just a lot more general.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, so many things here, Eric, including apps like TikTok and so forth, YouTube, Instagram. I mean, where do you see sort of, the future of these companies? Are they really here to stay? For anyone who's kind of in that limbo stage where they're sort of figuring out where they should post content, which platform they should be committed to. And obviously the real answer is probably as many as you can, possibly get your hands on, so to speak, or maybe it's just focusing on one kind of platform that caters to their expertise, whether they're really good with photos, whether they're really good with videos or writing or phrases that Twitter really alludes to. But, in terms of people who are skeptical that it's just going to get uprooted by another platform in a couple of years. So why am I going to spend all this time giving away my content on this platform, so to speak, that is owned by, essentially another corporation or company that could then, wipe it if they go out of business? So maybe I should focus my efforts on my own blog or my website. but then again, you're not getting those eyeballs that you really want. So, what would your advice be for those individuals in terms of the longevity of the platforms itself?
Yeah, I mean, kind of just going back to the entrepreneur analogy, I believe, put your eggs in one basket and watch it. Like it's better to do a really good job um, on one platform than try to just tackle as many as possible. With that said, many influencers do have a few platforms, but they'll have a main platform that they're investing most of their time. But I think to something you touched on that's really interesting is um, the fact that there's so many platforms emerging and there are so many content creators and influencers out there. It really keeps, I think, the platforms themselves in check, or should keep them in check, because if the platforms start, penalizing influencers or squeezing influencers to where it becomes difficult for them to create content, they're getting throttled, or it becomes difficult for them to, to monetize and earn a living from creating content, there are a lot of alternatives for them to jump to. And so the way I look at it is these platforms are also competing with one another for these content creators and these influencers, because the influencers essentially are just content creators that have done a really good job making content that people care about. And so if they start migrating to other platforms, then they're going to bring a huge amount of their user base with them. Now, I think one of the big challenges with new platforms, and we've seen so many come and go over the past several years, it's really, really hard to start a new platform because you need a network effect. And so with that, you need enough people on the platform connected and using it for it to become sticky. And so what tends to happen a lot of the time is you have platforms that get initial traction, but they don't hit that critical mass, or they can't sustain that user activity. And so they start fading out. And so that's the reason why, Facebook's been with us for so long, even though as a platform itself, it's lost relevancy to other platforms like Instagram, for example. But it's such a sticky platform because there's so many people ingrained in it. We still use it to sign into so many things. There's so many fantastic features within that platform. And so even though some perceive it as, hey, Facebook might not be as relevant as, let's say, Instagram, the truth is it has such a strong network effect that it actually is. And in many use cases, it's staying strong. And so that's really the value and the secret sauce to a company like a Facebook, is that they have that network effect. That's what Vine struggled with early on, was they were not able to build that network effect. And so when Instagram launched video, it was able to really leverage its own network effect to kind of provide creators and audiences with that same sort of content that was on Vine.
So, Eric, kind of dovetailing into that discussion, to take it a step further, right? I really like, and I can't emphasize this enough, the need for the network effect, right? That's very important, because you see a lot of platforms peter out, or they start really strong, and if you can't sustain user activity, you begin to fade, and then you lose that momentum to keep going forward. Now, when you look at the ecosystem of your business today, one of the key components of it, of course, is the big brands.
Yep.
When people think about big brands, traditionally you think about, of course, the Golden Arches, McDonald's, anywhere in the world. God, I was in Rajasthan, India for a wedding a year ago, found a great McDonald's, had a delicious Maharaja Mac. It was great. You think Disney and Coca-Cola and these things. But I mean, I would love to get your perspective a little bit more on your the connections you've had with the brands, how to engage brands, maybe a unique story from a brand or two that we might not be aware of. And then what I'm really interested to hear about, if you could just share some information on your Jack Ryan campaign to kind of infiltrate a new breed of viewers. I mean, that's one of my favorite shows, super exciting. And, I was going through that a bit, watching your videos and stuff like that. And it looked awesome, but I'd love to hear it from, our listeners would like to hear it from your perspective. So be great. And that's kind of like on a branding side, right? You're working a campaign,
Yep.
Just a little, tweaked a little bit differently. So if you could tell us a bit more on that, would be awesome.
Yeah. So I think in advertising, there's this, there are a lot of layers sometimes that you have to work with, just with any large company, right? And with advertising too. And I think, what happens sometimes is you have some brands that in that process, they sort of inherently lose a little bit of that creative edge, right? Because there's so many different boxes as a business they have to check in their messaging. But I think what really sort of separates the brands that are just, killing it from a marketing perspective versus the ones that are doing a good job are the ones that are killing it are really fostering that creativity and really see the value in that creativity, because that's really the X factor here, right? If you go to an influencer, especially, and you hand them an idea and you're like, hey, here's a strategy that we designed by committee, right? And you kind of shoehorn it into that content creator, it's not going to be nearly as effective as, going to a creator and saying, okay, let's be a little bit more collaborative. Let's leave some room for that creator to really create something unique and special in their own voice for their audience. Or even when coming up with that strategy, figuring out, how is this going to fit into the bigger social picture? What are some really specific trends that we're seeing when it comes to influencers, when it's coming to social media, that we could really, incorporate, right? To just show our audience, like, we get it, like, we're relevant. Like, this isn't some idea that was spun up 6 months ago that we're shoehorning in. This is something that maybe ties into that bigger idea that is arching across the entire organization, but that's really specific and really pertinent and really relevant to what's happening today. And in terms of kind of just what works, I would say, like, for a lot of the brands, and we're very fortunate to work with awesome teams that really get it, is just kind of have fun with it and be creative, be open to new ideas. With Jack Ryan, that was one of my favorite projects that we did with Amazon, because it was, it was really one of the key shows to really kick off Prime Video in a new way. And so one of the biggest challenges with Prime is so many people have it because we love Amazon, we love ordering products from it, but people don't really realize that they have Prime Video, which is a fantastic service. And so, Jack Ryan was a big push there, and it's an awesome show. And so they really, the team was awesome. They were creative. They let us get creative. And so we worked with a series of parkour influencers and, did CGI to create this immersive piece of content where the parkour influencers were, they put on these AR contact lenses, and then their world would transform into the world of Jack Ryan. And so we're pulling permits to do shoots and stunts, and I think we destroyed a BMW as part of that. And so we bought a car just to destroy for that shoot. But and we spent hours and hours with our insurance company to make sure that the influencers we're working with were covered, because they're jumping from container to container. And so I would say it really went above and beyond at the time the sort of typical influencer activation that people thought of, like, hey, let me hold up a product and tell you to go buy it, right? It was something that was really immersive and really exciting. And so when we look at content, it's always encouraging to push that envelope. So I think the lens and the advice I'd give to brands, and again, we're fortunate because a lot of our partners really embrace this, but it's really look at creativity as that driving factor, because that's what gets people excited, and that's what cuts through the noise and gives people something new. And that's where the creators really shine.
And Eric, in terms of Amazon Prime, you're mentioning, and and YouTube, for instance, has so many high quality, highly produced movies that are completely free, 2 hours in length, that feature tremendous actors, that are free on YouTube that they're uploading. Amazon Prime is basically like a Hollywood studio, and all this content, people have to choose where they're going to spend their time, right? So in terms of the big box office movie studios and so forth that are releasing in the movie theaters, I mean, that's already taken a hit. But where do you kind of see the future of how people are going to be creative, so to speak, and the future of social media in itself? You mentioned some really key points in terms of the critical mass that's necessary to create a platform, which is why let's understand probably Google and the Facebooks of the world and the Amazons of the world are going to be, solidified for a while in this space or whatnot. And it's not going to be easy to take them down. There is probably players who could work in conjunction with those platforms, so to speak, that are going to rise. And then eventually, they might get as big or as powerful. But sort of, with the advent and the introduction of VR, AR, and esports, which is
Yeah.
taking for the world by storm. So, I mean, that's coming up as a sport in universities now, an actual sport with, competitive tournaments and so forth that you might be able to get a scholarship, for. Where do you kind of see that intertwine with the social media world, and, really would love to hear your thoughts to kind of close out this episode.
Yeah. So I mean, I was born and raised in LA and grew up here. But with that said, you know, um, as funny as this sounds, like Hollywood could have been on the other side of the world, right? It was not it was not necessarily an industry or world that I felt particularly exposed to, even though I really was indirectly. But I guess my point is, it's not the film business is not a business that I'm ingrained with or fully understand. But what I'm seeing now is there's really been a blurring of the lines over the past several years between social media and the film and entertainment business really becoming sort of one. And I think YouTube has been a huge pioneer in this space. The early sort of onset of YouTube, people thought like, okay, this is going to replace television, and it didn't happen right away. But I think it's happening now, where and not necessarily replacing, but another alternative where I go on and I have a smart TV, and I have Netflix, I have Hulu, I have Amazon, I've all the sort of channels, but I have YouTube, and I spend just as much time watching videos on YouTube as I do on any of the other channels. And so I think when it comes to producing content, there's still going to be a need for Hollywood to really produce this high fidelity, high quality content, more premium content like what we see on HBO or any of the streaming services now. But there's also content at each and every level. And so I kind of look at it like a pyramid almost, where you have your content creators just posting avocado toast on Instagram at like the very bottom of the pyramid. And then you have these different sort of steps up all the way to premium content. And so I think from that standpoint, the lines have definitely blurred quite a bit. I think what's fascinating with esports and gaming is, growing up, parents would tell us like, hey, don't spend too much time playing video games. It's bad for you. Go outside and go like throw a ball or something, like that was sort of the mantra we got. And in today's world, parents are hiring coaches for kids to become better at the games they're playing and the esports they're playing. And, if you kind of think about it, a game, a video game now is just a much more sophisticated version of a board game, or even a physical game that we play. So I think in sum, what we're seeing is a blurring of lines between content that we're used to consuming and just kind of this and social media. We're seeing a blurring of the lines between the physical and digital world. And I think that's really what we're going to see more and more of is, if you go into this with this bias of like, basketball is a real sport because it's physical, while, esports is not because it's virtual, you're going to be missing a lot of what's to come in the new world. And so I think being able to really draw those analogies and not differentiate between the physical and digital world will give you a much better frame of reference for kind of figuring out where the puck is moving, so to speak, or where it's going over the next few years.
And I love that Wayne Gretzky reference. Absolutely. So we'll definitely, be excited for what the future holds. And Eric, you've been a tremendous guest. You've been incredibly insightful, dynamic, and just really shed light on where the social media environment is right now, where it's going to be. And, Jason, I think we got to have Eric on here again. What do you think?
We definitely do. It's been a privilege. I would say, Eric, one thing we'll look to do in the future too, as you talk about, as the lines continue to blur and things we experience is these shifts, maybe a little bit back to normal, but it'll always be consistent changes in verticals. Definitely driving more discussion around influencer marketing and branding, and having you back maybe to host some of these shows and bring on some more guests that can provide insights. But I would say also, how could our followers and listeners best access Open Influence, follow some of the latest developments, and even follow you personally and some of the stuff that you're doing out in the community in real time.
Yeah. I'll answer that one backwards first. So for me personally, LinkedIn is where I'm probably most active. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll be very disappointed because I'm not as active on that platform.
You and me both.
Ironically. But I mean, yeah, follow me on LinkedIn, just Eric Dahan, and you'll see me pop up. In terms of open influence, we've recently built a really cool tracker, just using a lot of our data and access to data to just provide the industry as a whole, whether you're a brand, starting a brand, an influencer, we're just a state of the influencer industry. What's the sentiment like? Which segments are performing well? What are sponsorships like? And so you can just go to our website, openinfluence.com. You'll see a link to the tracker there. And again, we built that so we could alleviate a lot of the uncertainty for people that built their livelihoods on this industry. They could look and see, which brands are spending or which verticals are spending. How is it trending? Because what I've learned is, people are smart and dynamic. They can manage through difficult times. What drives everyone crazy, though, is uncertainty. So how can we work to alleviate that so people could plan as far ahead as possible? And so, I would love for the listeners here to go and check that out and, share their thoughts and reach out if you have a campaign you want to start or you just have a question. Reach out to our team. We're around at all times. We really pride ourselves on being customer obsessed and helping create value. And so, we want to be a resource regardless if you choose to work with us or not.
And one closing piece to have some fun. What I'm going to do when we go live on our YouTube channel, I'm going to put a link to the Jack Ryan campaign on your website. Yeah. And I want all of our listeners to post just season 1. Maybe we can go into season 2, but post your favorite episode. And mine is certainly episode 7. I just love the action pack, especially when they raid the compound. It's just a lot of fun. But what a cool campaign. Keep up the great work that you're doing. And we're going to hear a lot more from Eric Dahan and Open Influence in the future. That I'm sure of. Thanks again, Eric, and talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, Eric. Really appreciate having you on here.
Awesome. Jason, Jared, thanks a lot, guys, for having me on here. It's been fun. And, stay safe and healthy and look forward to the next time we could all connect.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And openinfluence.com, folks. All right. Thanks for tuning in to Made for the Moment. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to a show dedicated to transforming business, media, and politics. And now a word from our sponsors.
Are you using a notepad? A journal? Post-it notes? Like it's 1970. Hey, what do you do to keep track of your tasks, your projects, your deals, your to-do list? Are you winging it? Do you just hope to remember everything? It's time to organize your life and establish some professionalism, unless you just want to be a disorganized mess and never make the money you want. Maybe you should try us instead. Because Task Chat, it's like your online, everything. It's project road mapping. Here, let's take a look. You can assign tasks, check your calendar, share and organize files, create notes based on the project, chat with your team, store your favorite quick links, the ones you go to every day, and a whole lot more. Yes, all in one place. Are you tired of creating tasks in your calendar? When you create a to-do list on Task Chat, it automatically scans your calendar and finds an opening. Yes, you heard me. Automatically. So there's no more of the whole, hey Bob, Tuesday at 4 o'clock work? 4 o'clock. Can you hear me? What do you mean Steve's not coming in? What time? Because what good is a to-do list if it's not on your calendar with urgency, immediacy, and because that notes app on your phone isn't exactly a secretary replacement? Just imagine how much more productive you could be if you spent 5 minutes every morning or the night before creating a to-do list. And then you woke up and your calendar was automatically mapped out for you, prompting you what to do that day, step by step. Task Chat is how you get things done. Let's face it, would you want to do business with a person who uses the Notes app on their phone to store important business information, like your client's wiring information? When you create a project or deal or transaction, it automatically creates a folder and multiple private and secure sections on the site. So you have a place to store files and documents and images that belong there. And your team members automatically get access to them if they're assigned to that project. And a lot of people do use some tools online, but we know how you work and get all over the place. And what a mess that is. It's a roadmap without the map. 2 words, one place. You'll find yourself chatting with clients or team members on Skype, hiring freelancers, and chatting with them on a job site, inviting project members to a file sharing site. Wouldn't you like just one place to keep track of everything going on? Now you can't keep track of it all. It's surely micromanaging, but you're not doing the micromanaging. Task Chat is. Project road mapping. Schedule tasks. View your calendar. Chat with your team. Store files. Create notes. Separate everything by the particular project you are working on, and provide access to only those people who should have access. You're a high achiever, and you want to be productive. You want to make things happen. You want to know exactly what to do every hour to lead you to success. This is how you will leave your mark. First, organize your life. Then, get on fire. And then, stay on fire. Head on over to taskchatapp.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Made for the Moment, with conversations and unique guests surrounding business, news, politics, wellness, and entertainment. And now a word from our special guest.
So welcome back to Made for the Moment. Excited to have our special guest here today, which is Jeff Weber, who is the U.S. Managing Director of Talent Village. And Talent Village, for any of you who doesn't know, is an innovative tech-enabled agency which has established itself as a key player in the influencer marketing space, which is absolutely exploding. And Jeff is sort of leading the creation of talent-first content strategies that spark engaging conversations, driving positive brand perception, and delivering real results. And he works with brands and agencies to engage consumers with consistency, credibility, and authenticity. And he's revolutionizing the way they approach content within the new digital age. So, really excited to have you on here, Jeff, so you can explain sort of the inner workings of influencer marketing and what it takes to sort of be successful as an influencer and also as a brand who's using influencers. So, Jeff, based on your successful launches with technology companies that you've created and where you've implemented the go-to marketing strategy, we definitely want to sort of pick your brain here and dive into the influencer marketing sphere, where it's headed, and specifically, about Talent Village and all of the work that you're doing there. What and who is Talent Village? Can you sort of explain it and give sort of the backstory there?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this, to the conversation. So Talent Village in and of itself is really, like you said, a kind of a tech-enabled agency. But really what we're doing is we're revolutionizing the space by putting talent first, right? We feel that brands need to focus first on talent as kind of the center of their marketing, right? And really what we're trying to do by working with professional talent in this space. So we're talking about chefs, we're talking about artists, musicians, etc. People with real credibility drive real results for our brand partners. That, in addition to a technology that allows influencer marketing to be kind of measurable, like with meaningful metrics, we really feel that Talent Village is really at the forefront of delivering actionable insight back to our brands while making sure that they really, really focus on putting talent first.
And Jeff, so when you talk about talent first, right? And, a lot of talents, of course, one of their biggest ambitions is to engage in brands. And I think, Jarrett kind of alluded to it at the beginning, but you've been very successful in founding opportunities and operations across industries, but specifically, you've worked with Fortune 500 brands for a long time with the technology companies that you've launched personally. But let's face it, right? Influencer marketing is alive and well, but things in general are hurting as a result of the crisis, right? When you especially when you look at the latest reports from the International Advertising Bureau. Most advertising related industries not only are hurting because of the crisis, right, but also there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of how long the recession is going to last. What's your perspective then from personally, from historically speaking, and Talent Village on what the ad industry and brands specifically can do to prepare from the downturn? And maybe you can draw from some past experiences you've seen from other recessions where brands have had to navigate those difficult situations.
That's a great question. I mean, obviously, I think the first thing that we need to do is understand that a recession is on the horizon, right? And in order to really make a plan that we can execute on, we need to first look at what has happened in the past, right? What can we learn from past recessions and make actionable, insightful decisions to help drive potential revenue in the future? And really, what we've seen in the past is that brands that actually invested in marketing overall during these recessions, what they've seen is significantly greater market share growth and revenue growth, not just during the recession itself, but also post-recession 3 to 4 years. So I'm always a firm believer in that good things come out of bad situations. And this is a massive opportunity for brands to actually invest heavily in marketing to drive those results. So coming out of the 2008 recession, while we saw ad spend overall decline, we did see that there were particular brands like Amazon, for example, that invested heavily in advertising, and the result was obviously significant revenue growth over an extended period of time since 2008.
So, Jeff, in the aftermath of the last recession, right, 2008, it's been about 12 years. Things have changed a lot, of course, in terms of influencer marketing, branding, right, how big brands go to market and try to reach targeted consumers. But yes, while things have changed a lot, core tenets of business, right, remain the same at the end of the day. So what are a couple of nuggets or pearls of wisdom that you've seen in your experience that you could share with some of these businesses that are looking to get engaged that you've learned from 2008 that they should be applying today to stay ahead of the curve and maybe avoid some of that negative pressure that might impact their business?
Yeah, so coming out of the 2008 recession, really what we've seen is that brands that invested heavily in marketing efforts saw significant positive results, right, from a revenue perspective. So in my experience, really the areas in which brands should be investing is in social. And the reason I say that is because we need to understand how potential customers are engaging. And really, they're really online, mobile first, and really, really starting to engage more with video as well. So in my experience, brands that can message around mobile first paid social strategies, the result will be significantly stronger sales results. So what I think from a marketing perspective, we need to move away from kind of these marketing for vanity metrics, if you will, that kind of brand awareness, and move down funnel and move customers down funnel towards conversion. And in order to do that, you need to implement paid social media strategies that result in significantly higher revenue results.
Yeah. So, Jeff, obviously some really great points there. And, we're really unsure of what this financial climate is going to look like, if it's going to be similar to 08. I mean, the big difference there is in 08 with the real estate market and the banks specifically. The banks were not solvent. They needed a tremendous bailout. And if there was a run on the banks, I mean, you have a major issue that was basically being fearful of being worse than the Great Depression, just because the lack of credit to be able to sustain businesses and so forth. So this is sort of an unprecedented event that we haven't really experienced, ever, if you're looking at from the lens of the last, century or so, to be completely shut down by the government in terms of businesses that are essential or non-essential or whatnot, and what classifies as that. But, if the stock market is any indicator of what's going on, I mean, we should be a little optimistic because, I thought that the stock market should probably be, maybe three quarters or even half of what it is right now. So I feel like it's getting buoyed up by the banks, by the Fed in particular, and so forth, most likely. But it's very volatile at the moment. But whether it's a recession, a depression, something's going to happen, and especially not just in a few months from now, but when you're talking about 7 months from now, when these banks that are basically claiming 3 months of mortgage payments all at once, that is going to present a huge problem for people. If they can't pay 1 month now, how are they expected to pay 3 months at once? It's not going to happen. So unless the banks make some revisions in terms of their commitments and so forth, we're going to see major defaults, major foreclosures, and that's when this whole thing is going to come to a head. And then let's sort of pivot into what's going to happen in terms of your space, your sphere. Advertising has been taking a hit for a while now, pre-COVID-19. I mean, the online space is they've been in a frenzy in terms of how to monetize, how to make money off of what's going on. And influencers are really scared about what's going to happen. For instance, if they've been making money off of advertising for brands and content, what do you think is going to happen there? Is this sort of the end, for influencers, so to speak, or should they have a brighter perspective on what's happening?
Well, I think if the question is, is this the end of kind of influencer marketing? The answer is yes, quite frankly. But it's really about how you're defining influencer marketing, right? So we see this space moving away from quote unquote influencers, kind of that mommy vlogger from Nebraska, and moving much more towards professional digital creators that have a particular expertise. Okay, so we see this influencer marketing ending and moving more towards influence marketing, people that have real credibility about what they're talking about, right? That's why a food brand should work with a chef rather than the guy down the street that just grilled out, right? But in order for this market to continue to grow, it needs to have that credibility there, because what we've seen in the past is a decrease in trust in the industry. So now we find ourselves looking for more authentic relationships. The consumers are becoming more and more educated and in tune with influencer marketing. So these relationships that brands are having with talent is incredibly, incredibly important. Influencer marketing is gone. Influence marketing will continue. And that the only way that it continues is if brands find these credible talents. So really what happened in this space from its inception was influencers were incentivized by followers and reach and impressions, right? And because they were incentivized, paid more for having a greater following, the result was fraudulent behavior by quote unquote influencers. That fraudulent behavior was purchasing followers, purchasing engagement. And once brands came to realize that this was occurring, obviously we saw a decrease in trust. In order for us to come back from that trust, we need to first be able to accurately measure all this data, but incentivize talent in a much different way. We need to incentivize them to look for deeper metrics outside of the total impressions and total reach. We need to develop really, really unique content that can drive significant results. One of the things that we talk about at Talent Village from a content perspective is professionally curated content with professional talent do deliver credibility and authenticity, but also actually increase trust as well, because we're measuring things like saves of posts or actual views on content and the repurposability of the content. So we don't talk about reach and impressions and because the by measuring those particular factors, you're actually going to decrease the trust in the space. So in order for us to come back, we need to make sure that we are measuring the right things and not incentivizing talent themselves to participate in fraudulent activity.
So Jeff, clearly the future of influencer marketing is definitely hitting some stumbling blocks, but the future of influence marketing, as you've said, is here. I wonder, and this is something I'm pondering and kind of thinking about as we go along here. Like in this environment, I'm fascinated actually what you said about purchasing influencers that purchase users and trust issues. And I'm sure there's a variety of ways to do that and look credible, because I don't think there's a lot of people that are digging in to look at who your followers are, for example. But do you think now in this COVID-19 era that we're in, there's going to be more trust-related issues, especially given that there might not be as much willingness in the marketplace for influencer marketing and professionally curated content? What are some other things that you think might come up during this time frame where we should be wary of? So for example, I'm new to Instagram, right? Jared's been training me how to use it and I'm enjoying it and I'm following some people. You have a Peloton and I'm following some people from the Peloton. I'm following, some action heroes that I like and all this stuff. But how am I going to know that I'm getting truly authentic content? What should I be wary of as just a regular follower during this time? Are there things that I should be looking out for? Because I think this is a pretty vital piece of information here.
Well, the fact that you're just getting on Instagram is amazing to me. You're definitely behind the times, to say the least.
I'm an old timer. I've been a Twitter guy. I'm good on Twitter, but I'm way behind the times on Instagram. I'm getting, like I said, I'm up to speed pretty quick. I'm a quick learner.
Quick learner for sure.
Well, look, there's essentially what we're gonna for you. The type of content that we're gonna look for and see from brands kind of in the immediate short term and moving forward is really connecting with people in a very tactful, kind of authentic way. So the content that you're going to start to see on Instagram is going to be much more around kind of current context, right? Tone deaf marketing is something that consumers will have a very negative reaction to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I mean, people's attention is diverted, right? We've got the smartphones, we've got our televisions, we've got, the traditional blog sources or magazines that we follow, whatever it is, if somebody even has a magazine in their possession anymore. But people's attentions are diverted through all these platforms, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. How do we take this context of people who are actually following these influencers, because there is value there, right? In terms of just being able to reach 200,000 people, right? 200,000 people follow you. I don't know what the quantifiable data is, and obviously that depends on the level of engagement and the eyeballs that are actually liking it and following it every day. There is definitely value there. But in terms of actually monetizing that, and obviously you have the algorithms that are at play, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, when 200,000 people, it's not like all 200,000 people actually read what you're posting. It's a small percentage of that. And Facebook in particular has been doing a lot of stuff where they're trying to get you to advertise. So they're going to limit that natural organic reach, so to speak, and that's sort of a challenge for influencers and so forth. But in terms of the brands looking to quantify that data specifically and to reach the maximum amount of people that they can by trusted individuals, trusted influencers or whatnot, who actually genuinely have a following, right? Didn't pay for followers, so to speak. They've got people tuning in every day. And the genuine promotion of that. These are actual products that they actually use. How can brands really cut through that noise, given the diversion of attention in all these different places? Where is the low-hanging fruit, so to speak? And how can brands reach this newly, isolated consumer?
It's a great question. Obviously, people more and more are consuming all forms of digital media as we're kind of stuck at home, right? It's insatiable at this point, right? And it's important for brands in order for them to either A, survive, or B, be successful in these times, to really understand how best to reach this isolated individual. And what we've seen is that people are really looking for the content that is actually engaging in terms of entertainment. We need to really focus, brands should be focusing on providing kind of more funny, lighthearted type of video that is both educational and entertaining. The days of traditional brand marketing, here's my brand, here's my value, here's what we stand for, is gone. We really need to move more towards an entertainment kind of focused content strategy, because look, people are on their phone all day because they are so isolated. That isolation also, breeds people yearning for connection. So that while isolated, they are looking to form a connection with particular brands, right? And so, how do brands kind of form that partnership, form that connection? And what we see and what we would recommend to brands is to really focus on messaging around the current climate. So, being cognizant of the change in lifestyles. So, for example, if I am, athletic brands, I'm going to, change my focus in terms of marketing much more towards wearing my athletic gear while I'm doing a workout at home, right? That kind of contextual type of marketing is important in building that connection, because that individual now feels that the brand understands them. They understand what I'm going through, right? That's incredibly important. So those two things, I think, are what you're going to see, right? A little bit more funny, lighthearted, entertainment type of content, and more contextual understanding from brands around the current situation in consumers' lives.
So, Jeff, as we take this kind of to the home stretch, clearly audiences engage with talent and content that is not only aspirational, but is also relatable, achievable. It comes from a position of expertise. So despite the current global crisis, it's clear that people still have aspirations, but their means have likely changed. So I guess I would ask you, or I'd pose, what advice do you have for talent that is developing content and looking to build brand partnerships? This is a big one, right? How do you engage? Regardless of the times, what are the best ways to engage with these brands and form and fortify partnerships that will last?
It's a great question. I think it's pretty simple. I think it's be authentic, be who you are, understand, what expertise you bring to the space. And most importantly, understand your audience, right? As brands are looking for to build these strong partnerships with a talent or creator's individual audience, that talent needs to understand their audience in a very, very deep way. So I think that is those are the two most important things: remain authentic, understand your audience, and by doing those two things, you'll maintain your credibility. And when you maintain your credibility, brands will want to work with you because you're resonating with your audience. I think also a second thing to really, really understand is the importance of the content that you're producing. Really focus on unique and really, really high quality content, because brands are really focused on repurposing those assets. So for brands to really drive home the ROI of their quote unquote influencer spend, they need to repurpose those assets to put a paid social strategy behind it. And in order for them to put a paid social strategy behind the content needs to be brand worthy, but also unique. So focusing on really, really high quality, unique content and providing brands the rights to repurpose your content is incredibly important. I think the final piece here is be selective. Okay, it goes back to that kind of authenticity and the credibility. Is you don't need to work with every brand that approaches you. Choose to work with brands that fit within your expertise, that will resonate with your audience. Because the last thing you want is for your Instagram feed to look like an ad board. They don't want to see a ton of different brands across a multitude of different industries. It's evident that essentially you're taking the money, if you will. In reality, what brands are really, really looking for, and we've talked about this a couple times, is really, really deep, authentic relationships with talent, because those relationships will drive ultimately greater results for those brands. And then the final thing I'll leave you with around this is understand what is most important to the brands. What are the KPIs? What are the key performance indicators for this particular for each particular campaign? Are brands really just looking for a couple likes or a couple comments, or are they looking for much deeper metrics like stays on post, or are they looking for more revenue driving opportunities where click-throughs and sales and conversions are most important to the brand? So for each campaign that an influencer or talent chooses to work on and is selective in that process, you need to also really understand what is most important to the brand, and therefore try and develop content and messaging that drives towards those particular results.
So Jeff, if I were to sum that up, so essentially be true to yourself and what you know. So you've got to know your audience, pay very close attention to the audience, and pivot to meet their needs, right? Especially in this cultural moment, right? You don't want to fall flat in your face. You don't want to do something that could accidentally even alienate your audience. Once you lose them, very hard to get back. You want to be selective, so choose to work with brands that fit within your expertise. And of course, look at the ROI of what brands are looking for when it comes to their social media spend, particularly the quality of the assets being created. And lastly, understand KPIs of brands that are most important, right? The KPIs that the brands they're vital to their success and vital to choosing the right individual influencers that will come on board and work with them. And I guess, Jeff, in closing, maybe tell our audience, how they can follow you, how they can follow Talent Village, and some other key things maybe Talent Village is doing to drive home all the points we just discussed on the show.
Yeah, so you can follow me at AquaFB2. I have been on Instagram much longer than Jason has. You can follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Talent Village. The other thing that I think that we're seeing within this space, in the quote unquote influencer space, brands are really moving much more towards kind of this professional expertise type of individual. And really, because of that, we're working with these talent agencies, and we really feel that talent is going to become the media of tomorrow. So what we're going to see in this space is talent agencies start to monetize all of their talents' feeds because it's now becoming an asset that they can make some money on. So those are the type of things that we're working on. Also, Talent Village has produced an amazing Instagram filter, which allows you to put a COVID mask on your Instagram post and story. A very cool thing, and we're actively participating in this as well. As much as we advise brands on a multitude of different things around how to best market in these times, we're also understanding of the current situation in our marketing and practicing what we preach, if you will, by donating funds to COVID-19 response and WHO based upon some of our different activities and whatnot. So we really feel that that influencer marketing or talent-led marketing is going to continue to grow. We're passionate about this space. We're really passionate about content. If you look at things, things that are growing really fast right now is TikTok. And why is TikTok growing? It's because it's entertaining. It's because it's new content. We see individuals, normal person from next door, developing content. Eventually, Jason, you're going to get to the point where you are developing some content simply because you have so much time more time at home and you're looking for some sort of escapism, I did my first TikTok video yesterday. I am definitely not an influencer or a talent in any way, shape, or form. It was fun. But people are really investing a lot more time into content. And as individuals and consumers invest their own time in developing more content, they're going to be more critical of brands' content as well and influencers' content. So that content needs to really stand up to pass the new high bar that people have based upon just simply the amount of consumption of content that they're seeing.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. And maybe we can ask you to stick around the studio for a little bit so you can help me set up my TikTok page. I might as well look, if I'm going and I'm doing this, I might as well go all in, right? And it sounds like a really cool platform. I've heard about it, but like I said, might as well, while we're home, take advantage of this opportunity and get on some of the hottest apps. So, Jeff Weber, thank you again for your time. We'll be sharing all the details and information and associated links below the YouTube video, and we look forward to having you back in the future.
Hey, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for the time. Look forward to it. Stay safe and healthy out there to everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. We really appreciate your key insights on the future of influencer marketing, what's to happen, and obviously for people to stay optimistic, whether they're an influencer or whether they're a brand that relies on influencers, that we're going to get through this and, things will sort of may not go back to exactly the way they were before, but we're going to come out of this stronger, and the economic system, will thrive again at some point. So good to hear from you, Jeff. Thanks so much for coming on.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to a show dedicated to transforming business, media, and politics. And now a word from our sponsors.